This character portrait I'm working on is Evelyn. She's a goblin in a video game I'm working on. Usually goblins are portrayed as ugly, but I wanted to make them really attractive. Let me show you my game real quick. So you have a fire gauntlet, and you can pick up weapons like this hammer, and you go into the depths where the levels are randomly generated. And it's gonna be great, all right? I'm a struggling indie game dev. Please follow the Kickstarter project. Every follow will make me feel a little bit less insecure. Okay, let's get back to the portrait. At least now you have a little bit of context. So I like using Sprite. That's this pixel art program. There's a link in the description, by the way. I get a tiny little kickback. But the one thing about Sprite that sucks is that you can't rotate the canvas. And it's actually so annoying sometimes, especially when you're using a Wacom like me, that I just prefer Photoshop, because in Photoshop, what we can do here is, let me switch to my Wacom. In Photoshop, I can just do this. So it'd be really nice if I was drawing on an iPad or something like that. But since I'm not, some of the lines, like my hand naturally does lines like that a lot easier than other ones, you know what I mean? Just because of the movement of my hand. So I prefer Photoshop, but I mean, Sprite is like 20 bucks and Photoshop is like 20 bucks a month or something. So there's a big price difference. So I'm just gonna align this, I think like that or whatever. I'm using a limited color palette here. And as you can see, I have, I'm trying to not use too many, but for like the skin tone, we needed quite a bit of greens, and then I have quite a bit of yellows here. I thought about decreasing it, but I'm also using them in the eyes, etc. I think something cool about pixel art, something I like to do, is limit the color palette. I think it just looks, it looks better, right? It's more aesthetic. The hair here and her clothes though do have very similar colors, so I need to go in and touch a bunch of this stuff up, and that's what we're gonna be doing in this video. I have a massive monitor, and I don't wanna have this tiny window. So I'm going to actually increase my window size. So I think I'm gonna give her a little bit more cleavage and not go overboard like some anime, you know. But so what we can do is go to window, arrange, and then new window for Evelyn. Now we have two of these, and then once we have two, we have to go to arrange and I think float in window. There we go. Now we got one of these little things, and we did it. We got the zoomed out view. This is so, I think, vital to doing pixel art. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is just drawing zoomed in the whole time. Because when you draw zoomed in the whole time, what happens is you don't realize that people can't see the details when they're zoomed out or whatever, you know? Okay, back to the cleavage. All right, so I think we just want to do a little bit more of a crease here. Maybe all the way up, you know, maybe something like that. A lot of times as I'm drawing, what I end up doing is overdoing stuff to then convince myself to do less. So maybe we'll overdo this cleavage. Actually, that looks good. That looks good. I don't think I overdid it. I think we're gonna stick with that. This window though, I feel like maybe I need to zoom in a little bit more. It was a little too small. All right, so something like this. And I almost want to put a highlight on this boobie, but I don't have a color for it. I could use like another color, you know, something like that. No, that was a terrible highlight. I think the shading here was a little bit harsh on the boob. So I think I need to smoothen it a little bit. Her boob didn't look that round, you know what I mean? All right, it's a little bit rounder now. Something like that. And it's kind of too much, it looks too much like a ball, right? I think I need to make it look, I made it look more like a ball. I think I need to make the boob a little bit, you know, a little bit like that. Yeah, there we go. Something like that. Something like that, looking good. All right, now it looks a little bit more natural, I think. And then what this line here was, this was like a crease in the cloth. So check this out, like if I do that, it kind of looks like there's creases in the cloth. And the cool thing about that is it gives it texture, and it also kind of makes it look like it's kind of like tight on her boobs, you know? And maybe I'll do one here. Let's see what it looks like. You know, maybe something like that. Man, I don't know. Let me try a couple other locations and see. it looks better in other locations. Maybe like there. Maybe it needs to be taller. Yeah, that's good enough. And this kind of feels like maybe it needs a little bit of shading here. Yeah, maybe something like that. And then we could also make the cleavage here a little bit bigger, but I don't really know if that's necessary. Whoa, that made her boobs look a lot larger. Just that one extra pixel. I'm doing such a high resolution because in my previous game Dwarf, we did like 16 by 16 character sprites, and the portraits were kind of low res too. And sometimes doing lower resolution pixel art, especially when you know how to draw, doing lower resolution pixel art is kind of harder. So, and I used to use a mouse. When I do low resolution pixel art, I use a mouse. I only use a Wacom when I'm doing more higher res pixel art. Man, I'm not sure what this shading should be like for, should it bend like this? Maybe, right? Dang, this part's hard because I'm not sure what the lighting on this chest should be. Maybe we want to actually shade the boob a little bit here to make it look a little bit rounder. And then kind of have, you know what I mean? Kind of have a little thing like this. So it kind of looks like the boob has a crease. I don't know if that's a good idea though. I don't know, man. I don't know if that looks odd or not. Kind of looks like a weird detail, right? Sometimes with pixel art, just like with like anime, you know how they make the noses like little things like that or whatever, and they don't put in the nostrils in every wrinkle or whatever. Sometimes it's better to just not do details, even if you know what they should be, because then you're putting too much emphasis on certain things. And so I'm trying. I think that's gonna be fine. I think that's gonna be fine. And I could put a little highlight here on the shoulder, but nah. Once again, that's too much info. I like this collar that she has on her neck. However, I was messing around with different shapes for it, and I don't know if I like this this piece coming down here. I'm gonna make a new layer for this though, because I might change my mind. So when you're doing something experimental, always do it on a new layer, because you might decide that you were wrong. So let's see if that looks better. All right, let's go back and forth. Should it have that corner or not? Oof, I think it's better without it, but that's a tough call. And I think I went too dark with it here. So let's actually change a lot of this shading. And we're gonna maybe use that blue there, something like that. And I don't think we need as much shading as we had there before, but it does look kind of good, right? I think this part here needs to get lifted so it looks more like it's going around her neck. I don't think we need that much shading. All right, time to speed it up and do a voiceover before you guys take a nap. When I'm focused, it starts sounding monotone and stuff. It's kind of why I don't really want to do live streams, but I thought about it. Let me know in the comment section below if you would have fun watching me draw and do a live stream, either on Twitch or YouTube, but I think most of my fans are on YouTube. So other than fixing that collar, I like to kind of hop around, and I noticed that the hair was very basic. It was like the whole thing, it was just one color. So I think there was a opportunity there to add detail, but also I want to kind of differentiate the hair from the color of the clothing. So it's why I wanted to add a lot more detail to it and use that darker kind of looking blue color. That way it doesn't look like there's hair where she's wearing the clothing, if you know what I mean. Now, I'm not the best at drawing hair, and drawing hair it's tough, man. It's tough, but one of the concepts that I try to go by is I just imagine these like giant thick strands, and then all I got to do is just separate the thick strands, and just doing that, it drastically increases how hair looks. But it is one of my weaknesses. But I've noticed that less is more with hair. So what I tend to actually do, and it ends up looking worse, is I draw too much detail in the hair, and the more detail I add, the more it looks like I don't know what I'm doing. So sometimes adding less detail actually will make things look better if the detail you're adding isn't actually enhancing it. With the corner here and the legging or stocking, whatever we're gonna call it, I wanted it to make it look a little bit rounder, and I wanted to make her thighs a little bit thicker. You know, I think part of the attractiveness of this goblin girl is her thick thighs, dude. So I wanted to shade it too, so that way it looks a little bit rounder. Not only bending it up will make it look a little bit rounder, but also shading it. But I have such minimal colors that it's pretty difficult, but I think I pulled it off. So near the edge there, I'm adding a bit of shading on the leg, and I was adding a bit of shading on that yellow, which, you know, made me want to go back to the other side and shade that as well. I completely shaded the inside of that green, so that way it actually looks like the leg is a lot rounder, and later on you'll see me round the legs even more. It's just that I hop around. I don't know if it's ADD or what, but I can't stick to like one thing, and it's because every time that I look at that preview, it's like I notice something else that needs attention, and instead of like trying to keep a list in my head like, oh yeah, go and fix that later, I feel like I'm gonna forget. So I go and touch it up right away in the moment that I notice it, instead of trying to save it for later. And the good thing about drawing this way is also that you don't spend too much time on one thing, and you're constantly going to the things that you notice need attention and detail. For the ears here, I wanted to give her more earrings. I think that it's, you know, I wanted to give her a lot more accessories all over her body, and you'll see me add rings to her fingers later as well. But I really like that she's wearing a bunch of accessories. There was a bit of a, if you notice, there's a bit of a gypsy theme here. Originally, I was gonna go for goth, but I think gypsy is pretty fitting, because in my game, the goblins, they're roaming. The king ordered an eradication of all the goblins, so they're roaming around in caravans, and so the gypsy theme is kind of fitting for that. But I put little notches in her ear, and you notice that she has scars and stuff like that. I wanted to show that even though she looks really pretty and she's got these nice clothes and stuff, she's not like a princess or whatever. The goblin life is tough, man. So that's why I added the scars and the chips in her ear. So here I went and added some highlights to the hair as well, and this will give it a bit of dimension too. I'm not the best at coloring hair, adding highlights to hair either. I didn't really know what to do other than like add a highlight near the edge, but just adding a highlight near the edge already is making it look better. Another thing that you could use the highlight for is also trying to add detail, not just to make it look round, but to add sort of like extra strands of hair. But I was trying to avoid that because I feel like it's more likely that I'll mess that up than make it work. You know what I mean? One of the most frustrating things for me when I'm doing pixel art is trying to add these highlights and going pixel by pixel along this entire edge. I don't know if there's like a simpler way to do it, but man, it's so tedious. One of the worst things about pixel art is that it's really tedious. Luckily, when you do a higher resolution and you're using a Wacom, it kind of feels like you're drawing. But still, it's the precision that you need makes it really difficult. And while I was doing this artwork, I actually switched from using the Wacom to the mouse, because for some reason Photoshop kept messing up, either the pressure sensitivity or something. But I would like select a color and it wasn't selecting the colors right. So remember how I was telling you guys I prefer Photoshop? Yeah, I prefer Photoshop if I'm using the mouse, but with the Wacom, Photoshop was like lagging a little bit and it was like glitching a little bit, which made working on this so frustrating. With the intricate details here on the headband, I didn't have a darker brown to kind of make that like fade away. So I kind of just was trying to like sprinkle the details so that way it looks like they're fading away. And I think it looks really cool, but man, that was difficult as well. By the way, this character's name is Evelyn, and she's going to be the love interest and shopkeeper. I can't decide whether she's going to sell items or trinkets. She does have a lot of accessories, and I was thinking that the trinkets give you like passive buffs, so you would get earrings. I was imagining that the UI would have these two giant ears, the main character's ears, and you add earrings on the ears, and those are like little passive perks. The game's going to be an RPG, and I think I'm going to allow, I know roguelites are really popular, and originally I was going to make it a roguelite, but doing a story in a roguelite is kind of tough and whatever. But I think I'm going to make an option to let people turn on permadeath and all these other roguelite settings. But for some people who are in it for the story and don't want to die don't want to restart the game every time they die, I'm gonna allow them to kind of continue the game without it feeling like a roguelite, and they'll just be playing a normal RPG. By the way, this symbol on her I don't know what we call it, whatever, shirt, belt, the symbol there, that's a number 9. Number 9 is my favorite number, and I wanted to create a symbol for magic. It's like every game has a different symbol for magic. Sometimes it's even an object like a crystal or something like that, but I think I'm gonna make it the number 9 because it's my favorite number. And the number 9, the meaning behind it is like wisdom, intelligence, and awakening, or a whole bunch of stuff like that. That's pretty fitting as well. With the hair right there, it's the same color as her clothing, so it's really important for me to make sure that the hair stands out there. And it kind of looks, right now it kind of looks like Splatoon hair because of the way that it gets like a little bit thicker near the bottom, but I'll fix that later. I got distracted by doing some shading around the body. It's like once I started to shade, I was like, all right, let me just shade the body everywhere. And here is where I'm making the thigh look a little bit rounder. It's and then I got distracted, and I don't really like to use stipple for shading unless it's on a texture. So here that's a fabric. So on the fabric, I think it's kind of fine to use stipple, but for like skin, I don't really. Actually, it's not called stipple. It's called dithering. I'm sorry. I'm a noob. Yeah, so I don't really like to dither unless it's on a fabric, and that way I'm using it as a way to shade and sort of add a texture to that object. There are a lot of places where I threw down color, but I never did the hard edges because that's the like tedious, annoying part. So here I'm trying to improve all the edges on the clothing. And then I figured that it looked like there was a missing detail on a lot of the belt right there. So I added in some creases. The creases also make it look more like a fabric, whereas before it might look like it's, I don't know, some kind of harder material. I find it really satisfying to go in and sprinkle that darker color into the creases. That's a really easy way to make your art look better, is whenever you have a crease, a fold, or anything like that, take a darker color and sprinkle it along that bend, that crease in the fabric or whatever, and it'll look a lot better. I wanted to make the shading a little bit smoother on the leg, and the edges are pretty messy as well. When I sketch pixel art, it is extremely messy, and especially when I'm using a limited color palette, I try to intentionally use all the colors in all the parts, and then the cleanup is the satisfying part. I'm sorry I didn't show you guys me drawing this from the very beginning, but it started off as a digital sketches. I didn't start drawing this right away as pixel art. I would if it was low resolution, but for something that's higher resolution like this, I spent like a week doing character design and looking at outfits and picking out outfits. It took a really long time to design this character before I even started doing any pixel art. I sent the concept to my girlfriend and she showed me a whole bunch of outfits and kept messing with it for a really long time. And, you know, she actually made it look really cool. So I love you, babe. So in the fabric here, I'm trying to improve the shading as well. And sometimes it's really tough to decide what pixels to remove from the original sketch. And sometimes I even, if I spend too much time between the sketch and cleaning it up, sometimes I'll forget what some of the lines and some of the stuff that I drew even represented, because it's the sketch version of it is pretty messy. However, what I love about the messiness of having a sketch and then cleaning it up is that sometimes some of that messiness, it actually adds a little bit more character to it, a little bit more personality. There's different kinds of styles of drawing where you can go for really, really clean and these really large chunks of color. And I think that's really good for low resolution because you need to differentiate between objects, and adding too much detail to low resolution pixel art makes it look messy and confusing. But when you're doing high resolution pixel art, the technique of using large chunks of color is still pretty good, and I am kind of doing that in this art, but you can get away with a lot more just random colors, random details, a lot more messiness. And the reason is because people already know what the object is, so the messiness kind of just looks like extra details on that piece of art that you're doing, you know what I mean? So there are benefits to doing a high detail, but if you're doing high detail, you need to be pretty darn good at drawing. The appeal of low resolution to me is that not only can you get the art done much faster because it needs less detail, but also if you're not good at drawing, then those details in low resolution aren't necessary. When doing pixel art, this high resolution, not adding detail to it kind of defeats the purpose. So I'm taking the opportunity to add a ton of detail to this, and I could work on it forever. Like once I start the process of polishing art, and I'm sure you know this too, like you could polish and polish and polish for a very, very long time. Like this piece of artwork, when you look at it, it almost looks done at every single stage, but there's always something that I see that I could add to improve the artwork. And yeah, sure, at a certain point you kind of just gotta step back from it and say that it's done or whatever, but that is so difficult for me. I sometimes have to literally just like pull myself away or start another piece of artwork so I stop thinking about it. So I went back to the hair there and I made it look less like Splatoon hair. I didn't think that having that bigger, chunkier end made sense. And then I started to add shading right there to that gold part, and that gold part's actually pretty flat. If you look at the the preview window of it, you can see that there's not really any shading on it. I thought I was gonna add the shading to that part, but I guess not. I ended up going down to the lower part of it to clean that up a little bit more. And you can see I'm trying to shade the edge there so that way it looks rounder. I think it's awesome that I'm using orange as a way to do some of the shading. It's really satisfying to me to use a color you wouldn't expect for different parts of the art piece. And like limited color palettes, they make it easier for my brain, because if you don't limit your color palette, what ends up happening is you're always just decreasing the saturation so everything kind of looks a lot more monochromatic. And what monochromatic is, it's when you just take a color and you make it darker, or you take a color and you make it lighter. And just making colors lighter and darker makes them look a specific way and makes them look kind of boring. So the cool thing about having a limited color palette is if you have like yellow, instead of just making it a less saturated yellow because you're shading it, you end up using a color like brown or orange or whatever, purple. And to me, that makes the artwork look more artistic, but also it's easier for me to work with a limited color palette because I don't have to mess around with trying to find the right colors. I'm not good at picking colors, and I used to draw with pencil, just black and white, and I love, like, you know, the manga art style, and it's So coloring was something that I never got super good at. I mean, there's very basic concepts that you need to understand, like complementary colors and triadic, etc. But even with that, it's still difficult to pick the perfect shade when you're drawing. There's so much time that's wasted, like increasing the saturation, decreasing the saturation, changing the hue a little bit. But a limited color palette allows you, when you're doing high detailed pixel art like this, it allows you to get stuff done a lot quicker, because you don't have to think about every single shade when you're trying to create form. You know what I mean? Like with the hair, for example, here, like I only have like 3 colors to work with. So if I want to make something darker, I have the darker color. If I want to make something lighter, I have the lighter color. It makes it really easy to go in wherever I want and have the colors basically ready for me. I'm kind of struggling adding detail here to the hair. I don't know whether I should do like diagonal highlights or like straight up down kind of stuff. So I was getting a little bit frustrated, so I decided to just go work on the bangs. Like that might be easier, but look how messy the bangs are. That's not gonna be much easier, but hey, at least I can like clean it up a little bit. So I was thinking about maybe on the tips of the hair there I could add some highlights, but I think later on I go and I remove them. With the bangs, I didn't really want them to be too messy. I mean, you can make hair as messy as you want and it'll still look realistic, because hair can be as messy as you want. But I wanted to create kind of like chunks, and I'm also doing that with the highlights. I'm trying to make the highlights be a little bit more chunky instead of kind of just sporadic. And I really like that there's a bit that I'm using purple in the hair, because it makes this whole artwork kind of have this, it makes it have a split complementary art style. And I was reading this coloring art book for Dota 2, and it was like an art guide, and I think it's one of the best art guides that I've ever seen. It's somewhere on the internet for free. And one of the things that they love to do in Dota 2 is split complementary. And split complementary is kind of like triadic, but a triadic would be like red, yellow, blue, whereas split complementary in this case is yellow, green, and purple. So you have 2 colors that are kind of near each other. In this case, for me it's yellow and green, and then a color on the opposite side, which is the purple. And this is really appealing to people, and I don't even really think about it. I kind of just naturally drift towards doing split complementary. And the thing is, for another character I might do just complementary or just triadic, but it's since I'm not that good with colors, that's like a really easy way to pick colors for your characters. Just use those concepts and it'll look like you know what you're doing. I went back to that piece of hair and decided to try a different method for the shading. I also wanted to do it that way to even further create contrast between the fabric and the hair, since they're very similar colors. They are the same colors. And I'm not super satisfied with how that came out, and you know, I'll look at some references and maybe go back to it later. But I wanted to when I have momentum, I don't want to start watching tutorials on how to like draw hair, you know. So I just kept on pushing forward with the hair, even though it is a pain point for me. And there's really easy stuff that I can tackle, like making these bangs a little bit cleaner. So for now, I'll just do that. And later on, maybe I'll go in and do another pass on all the hair at the very end. I was trying to figure out how to shade that edge, and it was a lot of trial and error. I just wanted to see if something looked better. And the funny part is that I removed a lot of the shading that I actually did. I wanted there to be contrast, so instead I just grabbed black and put it under that part. And then I noticed that the shape of that belt was a little bit off, and noticing that the shape of stuff is off is really important, because it can feel like you finished something and you're done, and then it can be a pain to go in and work on something that you felt like was done. So it's easy to kind of like play this game where you convince yourself, oh, that looks fine, let me move on to the next thing, and then never go back to things because you already worked on them. You know what I mean? But I'm letting you know now that it's okay to go back and completely redo things if you notice that there's something off about them. It sucks because it does take a lot of it does take a lot of time, but I think that is a big thing that differentiates people who just try to get a piece of artwork done and people who try to get it to look the best that they can. With game development though, it's tough, man, because I don't have all the time in the world, you know. Time is money. Like right now I practically have no income, and I have to, what I'm trying to do is get this game into a state where I can make a playable demo to show publishers and to let you guys play, so that you can support a Kickstarter. And then based on how well the Kickstarter does, that'll kind of decide how much time I have to put into this artwork and stuff. And like worst case scenario, I might put too much time into creating the demo. There's like this weird balance between like making sure that too much time isn't put into it, but then if you don't put enough time into it, it doesn't look good enough for people to even want to support the project. But like one of the toughest things about that is with the last project I worked on, Dwarf, we worked on it for like 4 years, and the game would have been profitable and done fine if we were able to get it done quicker. But if we got it done quicker, then the quality wouldn't have been there. So it's a weird balance between the quality and time. And if you're not a very good artist, then it's going to take you a very long time to draw high detail good art, and it might be better than to just go for a simple style. But I want to show you guys my potential, man. All right, I wanted to make this portrait so good so that you guys can stop thinking that The Last Phoenix is going to be an ugly game. I'm going to put a link in the description and probably like pin a comment if you want to support your neighborhood game dev. I don't have a job, so I kind of need to make this work. Hands are tricky, man. Hands are very tricky. So I kind of try not to do anything too special with hands. But the thing with hands that I keep messing up on is like the knuckles. Like I made her finger look kind of too smooth, right? I kind of needed to create sharper corners, I think, where the knuckles are. But I kind of tried to hide the fact that I don't know how to draw fingers with a ring, and I think it might have worked, dude. I think it did make your hand look better. So the reason why I moved that scar down is that the scar was really close to that other bracelet, and I don't like it when two objects are right next to each other. It's because like the way people's minds work is that it starts putting objects together because of like proximity or whatever. So I wanted to move the scar lower just because of that bracelet. It's to differentiate between the two, between the leg and the whatever. It separates the scar from the bracelet, helps separate the thigh. I think you know what I mean, but you have to look at where two objects meet and always try not to make it in a spot where there is a corner or whatever, you know what I mean? So like for example, whatever, I think you guys get what I'm saying. What I'm saying, I noticed that it looked kind of natural to have those little bends kind of different, but at the same time I felt like, you know, it'll look better if I kind of make them all almost identical, like more evenly spaced and stuff like that. It also made the shading and stuff easier. And I forgot to outline a lot of the stuff because when I'm sketching, there's like kind of like two ways to sketch. One is with color and then one is with outline. And I like to draw with outline, but then once I start adding color, but either you outline and then you fill it in with color, or you have color and then you add outline. And the way that I did this piece of artwork is that I did color and then I'm gonna go in and do outline. Normally I don't really draw like that, but with pixel art I prefer to use color instead of outline, for some reason. I think it's because pixel art is so heavily dependent on color that getting the colors right is kind of more important, and you don't really need outlines in most pixel art. And there's a lot of pixel art styles that look fantastic, like Flint Hook or whatever, that doesn't even have outlines. And usually I kind of in a video game, I like to use outlines so that you know what's an object and what isn't. But like, I'm not going to add outlines to trees in the background in a video game. So in this portrait, she really doesn't need an outline. And I thought about giving her like a black outline as well. But there was a point when I was sketching where I was giving her a black outline. But if I just outlined the very outside, then it almost looks like a highlight, you know what I mean? And I might do like a white highlight around the entire portrait as well, or like a drop shadow or something. But whatever, man, we'll figure that out later. So here I kind of wanted to just touch up some of the shading. I was hopping around trying to make the shading better for a bunch of parts, and fiddling with removing a pixel here, adding a pixel there. Those extra little pixels on the hand, those were actually the back of the back finger. And then I noticed that this finger probably shouldn't have a highlight near the bottom, but it should actually have some shading. So that shading helps kind of like show where the knuckle is. So I think that was a great addition that I did to the shading. But here, that hair, the way that it was touching that thumb bothered me. It's that thing that I was saying earlier, where it's really important where one object ends and touches another. So I didn't like that the hair was kind of like mimicking the shape of the thumb. So I wanted to change that. And if you look near the top left corner, the hair also touches that fabric right where it has a corner. So that's another thing that I noticed and I want to get to and improve. But man, this bracelet here was giving me a really tough time. It's so messy that I kind of wish I didn't sketch some stuff, man. Some stuff you don't want to sketch. And I also sometimes to get like a quick anti-aliasing effect, what you can do is you can use like the blur tool. But the problem with the blur tool is that it's gonna add a lot more colors. Like the blur tool is great for shading, like on the thigh. I could use the blur tool to create a much better gradient on her thigh, but it would add a lot more colors. And I want to go for that minimal color look. But yeah, the easiest way to probably shade a lot of stuff is to use a blur tool. So here I wanted to make sure that those those cuts in the fabric weren't exactly the same as the hair. And then remember earlier I told you about using dithering. So I'm using I decided, man, dithering would look great. This is the perfect spot for dithering to shade the fabric under to shade the shirt under the I don't know what you call that, cloak or something. what do you call that purple thing? Vest, cloak? I don't know, man. A hood? It's just anime clothes. That's what it is. Now's a good time to vibe to the beat while I add some touch-ups. This next song is by Morty, and he's doing the music and the sound design for The Last Phoenix. He's amazing. He's super pro. He did all the audio work for Dwarf as well. We have a Discord community link in description, and check this out. Arto Frob already posted some fan art. It's so good, dude. I have a Patreon, and this is the Wall of Heroes. Kyle, you MVP. I'm gonna make Kyle a character in the game or something, man. I'm uploading versions of The Last Phoenix on my Patreon, and I'm gonna reward everyone with it in game or something. I'll see you guys next time. A Dev Live.